Okay, let's go. Let's go from chapter 35. Because there's something very interesting over here, actually. It's an Indian of ecology, believe it or not. I think that in general, I think Jews are perhaps not very ecologically minded. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's Jew. I don't think that they're anti-ecology. It's just that, you know, being Jewish over history, it's been somewhat of a preoccupation. So there are like other things to be concerned about, like staying alive, for example, and that ecology has sort of taken a back seat. But it's interesting that the Torah already is laying down a certain kind of an ecological framework that certain cities should have. And it includes having a green area going all the way, like a green belt going all the way around the city, which is forbidden to build inside. Let's have a look and see. It's something. It's really quite fascinating, actually. Tzav es bnei Yisrael v'nosnu la'levim minachlas achuzasam orim lo Chavez. So the Levim, because they don't have their own section inside of the land of Israel, they're going to be given cities throughout the land, which is going to allow them to be able to live over there. Not only that, but the cities have to be surrounded by an area, a green area, and every city has to have this. Now you can see in the chart on the other side of the page that there's a machloikas, there's a disagreement amongst the various authorities as to exactly how big this is. Right? But there's no machlokas, there's no disagreement about what's required, which means you have in the middle, you have the city, then you have an area which is left open around the city, and then you have the fields and the vineyards that go around all of that. And the question is how much is supposed to be left? I don't know, there's no definitive answer over here, Mit Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, so he'll be able to tell us exactly what's needed. But in the meantime, that the Levium are supposed to live in those cities. And the open land is going to be used in order for them to be able to, to feed their livestock, their cattle, their flocks. And it requires 1,000 amot, 1,000, I don't know how you say amot in English. Here they call them cubits. I don't know, it's a measure, right? And it needs to be 1,000 amot all the way around. It's past Kedma Alpayim Biama, it's past Negev Alpayim Biama, it's past Yam Alpayim Biama, it's past Tzafon Alpayim Biama, which means that what? That it's all going to be completely square, right? So you've got the city, you've got the open area, you've got the fields and the vineyards. All of this is becoming, it's a square with concentric boxes inside of it, right? Okay, so before we go any further, what's the function of all of this? What's the point of them all? The idea was, in order, believe it or not, that the place should look nice. It should have some kind of a beauty to it, some kind of an innate beauty to it. It should have greenery. It should be a nice place to be. And then outside of that, there will be the fields and the vineyards, and where the people are going to be working. What's interesting is like this. We don't see, this is not something which is being commanded to everybody. It's being commanded for the lands that were being given over to the Levites, which is interesting because really you would have thought that if the Torah wanted this kind of an ecological setup where you've got greenery and you've got fields and everything, that maybe it should be applicable to every single city that's being established. They should have the same laws over here. But for some reason the Torah is putting into place a concept where the cities that the Levites are in are the cities that have to be the most pleasing. They have to be the ones that are the most aesthetic, right? With the entrance into the city. You've got to go through the fields and you've got to go through the open area and the parkland, and then you can get into the city itself. Why is that? So I think, Pshat, I've never seen this written down anywhere, but I think the idea is that I think the idea is that because the Levium represent the spiritual mentors, the spiritual dimensions of the Jewish nation, the cities of the Levium were supposed to be places that were imbued with spirituality, so that was mirrored by a certain physical beauty as well. Right? Which means that certain religions believe that physical beauty is something which is not good, it's something which is not, it's going to detract from your spiritual growth. And yet Judaism is teaching that physical beauty is something which can enhance your spiritual growth so long as it's used properly. And it's fascinating that the only cities that are given planning, like landscaping, are the cities that are given over to the Levites. And over there, that means that whenever a person is going to come into the city, whenever a person is going to be going to have any dealings with the Levium, he's going to have to go through the parks in order to be able to get into the city itself. Obviously, to be given an upbeat, to just have a more positive feeling about what's going on. And then over the page, it says like this: "Ve'es harim asher titnu laleviim es sheish arei hamiklat asher titnu lanus shama harodzeach v'alem titnu 42 ir." That there are cities of refuge. Now, what are the cities of refuge? Where the Levium are going to live are the cities of refuge. What is a city of refuge? So like the Torah says, that somebody who kills inadvertently, somebody who commits manslaughter, is not put into jail, rather they're sent off into the city of refuge. Where is this city of refuge? They were dotted all over the country. And the idea was that the city of refuge was inhabited by the Levium, and if somebody committed manslaughter, somebody killed inadvertently, they had to get to that city of refuge before they would be caught by the official avenger of the person that they killed. And then they could stay over there in the city of refuge and they couldn't be touched. And once they got into the city limits, then that's it. No one was allowed to touch them, and they could stay over there. So the first thing that we need to understand is something that's quite fascinating, is why on earth are we sending people who commit manslaughter into the cities that are comprised of Levium? Now, we just mentioned before, these cities over here are cities which are imbued with Kedusha. They're very spiritual places. They're very uplifting places. And it's an interesting idea that the people that are being sent over there to live together with the Levium are people who've committed, it's a pretty serious crime, right? It's a crime which doesn't have a proper way of being able to repay what has happened. Right? When a person kills somebody, when a person murders somebody else, so if all of the various criteria of the law take place and everything runs the way that it's supposed to, then that person loses his life. He's executed by the Beis Din. When a person steals something, so the person has to pay back whatever he's stolen. When a person breaks something, he needs to break back the damage that's been done. The problem over here with manslaughter, with inadvertent murder, is that the person, how are you going to pay this back? What are you going to do? Right? The person's lost their life. In theory, if the person's lost his life, then the person who took his life needs to lose his life as well. But that's only applicable when the person does it on purpose. If he doesn't do it on purpose, then we're left with this interesting situation. What do we do with him? If he pays money, well, paying money is not going to redeem the fact that he killed somebody by mistake. If he's put to death by the Beis Din, if he's executed by the Beis Din, well, that's too much. That's not the punishment that he's supposed to have. So the Torah puts into place I don't even know if it can be described as being a punishment, but the Torah puts into place a repercussion, which is that they have to go into the city of refuge. They have to go and spend time together with the Levium. They have to go spend time in a more spiritual environment, in a more spiritual atmosphere, in the hope that that's going to have some kind of an impact, some kind of an effect on him. Till when? Let's have a look and see. Which means altogether there are 48 of these different cities dotted around all over the place. The first 6 that were put together, interestingly enough, 3 of them were on the other side of the Jordan, and 3 of them were in Israel proper. So the Gemara itself wants to know, how can that be? You've got the vast majority of the Jewish people are living in Israel proper. You've got only 2.5 tribes living on the other side of the Jordan. You've got 9.5 tribes that are living in Israel. So why would it be that you've got 3 cities of refuge over the other side of the Jordan and 3 on the Israel side of the Jordan River? Why would that be? It doesn't sound like the distribution is right. Maybe you should have 5 in one and 1 in the other, right? Or at least 4 in one and 2 in the other. So the explanation that's given is, from the Gemara, the explanation that's given is because the people that lived on the other side of the Jordan River, they were a lot less careful, which means that there was more manslaughter taking place. Therefore, there was a greater need, right? Per capita, there was a greater need to have these cities than there was on the other side of the Jordan River. I once heard an interesting idea, which is, why would that be? I mean, the tribes of Reuven and Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh, they're regular, they're just like everybody else. They're not considered to be more bloodthirsty than anyone else. They're not considered to be more impetuous than anybody else. Why would it be that you've got more cases of manslaughter taking place over there than you have on the other side of the river? So the explanation I heard once many years ago was that the minute you're living outside of the land of Israel, so by definition your spiritual level is going to drop a little bit. Which means the land of Israel is a land which is imbued with spirituality. The question over here is, if people are living outside of the land of Israel, 928. If the people are living outside of the land of Israel, so by definition it means that they're going to be a little less sensitive to the spiritual dimensions, and that lack of sensitivity is going to trickle its way down. Now, what does that mean? The sinning inside of the Jewish people is, we're all considered to be attached to each other. Now, the Gemara says, "Kol Yisrael arevin zeh b'zeh." We're all attached to each other. I often describe the Jewish people are like a pearl necklace, right? Which means that you've got the pearls all strung along, right? They're all there, and they're strung together with a piece of string that you can't see the string, right? If it's strung properly, all you can see is the pearls themselves. What happens when you take the pearl necklace and you put it out on the table and you push the one in the middle, push it up? What's going to happen? Everything else is going to go up together with it. The ones closer will move up higher. The ones at the ends, maybe the movement will be so minimal that you won't even be able to recognize it. So the idea is like this, that the whole of the Jewish people are attached to each other. For somebody to be able to commit manslaughter, for somebody to be able to kill somebody inadvertently, means somehow or other that there's some kind of a flaw in some kind of a flaw in the hierarchy, the Jewish, like in the spiritual dimensions of the Jewish people, that there's not enough spirituality. If there was more spirituality, then that person wouldn't be able to do what he did. To translate it into, perhaps into something which is a little bit easier for us to understand, there's a very famous quote from Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, the head of the Mussar movement, the founder of the Mussar movement, who said that when somebody is a little lax in their mitzvah observance in Kelm, so in Paris, a Jew transgresses Chavez. What's the connection? Kelm is over here, Paris is over there. This person, what did he do over here in Kelm? What did he do? He didn't do anything. He was a little less careful than he would normally have been, and the end result is somebody in Paris is not keeping Shabbos now. Why is that? Because Kol Yisrael arevin zeh b'zeh. I think I mentioned a while ago. It's a very beautiful story that Rav Shach, Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha, the late Rosh Hashiva of Ponevezh and the leader of the Lithuanian, Haredi community over here in Israel, in his time, Rav Shach was once walking with one of his Talmidim in Bnei Brak on Shabbat, and as they got close to Rehov Jabotinsky, they started hearing the cars. Rehov Jabotinsky is the border between Bnei Brak and Ramat Gan, and the same in the way, unfortunately, in the way that Bnei Brak is a very orthodox city, so Ramat Gan is, I guess, a very unorthodox city, and there's lots of Shabbos, lots of transgressions are taking place over there. And there's an enormous road that runs through called Rehov Jabotinsky, and of course, unfortunately, it's very busy on Shabbos. And So they were walking and they could start to hear the cars. And Rav Shach turned to his student and he said to him, "What is that noise that we can hear?" So he says, "Rebbe," he says, "it's cars." So Rav Shach says to him, "Why are they driving cars on Shabbos?" So the Talmud, imagining that Rav Shach, I don't know, something must have happened that that he'd lost his he'd lost his ability to work things out. It was a rather simplistic question. He says to him, because these people, they don't keep Shabbos. Ramat Gan and Tel Aviv are not places that are great bastions of Torah, Torah mitzvahs. So Rav Shach shook his head and he said, "No," he says, "that's not the reason why they're driving over there on Shabbos." He says, "The reason they're driving over there on Shabbos is because we over here aren't careful enough in Bnei Brak." He's saying the same thing that Rav Yisrael Salanter is saying, that if we would take things more seriously, there would be a trickle-down effect. Right? Which means that no one's suggesting that if you keep Shabbos entirely, then all of a sudden the whole of the Jewish world will start keeping Shabbos just like that. But there is no doubt that your keeping Shabbos is going to have an effect. It's going to have an impact on the greater. It's like a ripple effect, right? On the Jewish people, it's going to have an effect. How, what, where, when, and who? I don't know. Right? You have to wait and see how that impact is going to be felt. Yom Kippur over here it's really quite an interesting experience. Yom Kippur. I don't know how Yom Kippur is where you people come from, but over here, I think 85% of the Jews living in Israel, they keep Yom Kippur in one form or another. Right, so maybe they'll go to synagogue, which they don't normally do, or maybe they'll fast a little bit, or maybe they'll light candles, whatever it is. But it's an incredible statistic. And, the reason for that, presumably, is because the more seriously something is taken in spiritual terms, the more seriously something is taken by the religious communities, so the more that's going to be felt by everybody else. And because Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, and because Yom Kippur is taken so seriously by such an enormous amount of people, it's having an effect on the non-religious as well, that they can feel something and they want to be a part of that too. So what does it mean over here? Here it means that the people who have committed unintentional murder, right, are going to go where? They're going to go into an environment which is very spiritual. It's imbued with spirituality, right? Why would you do that to somebody? Because the idea is that if this person did what he did, it means that there was something not quite right in his spiritual levels. His spiritual equilibrium was off a little bit, right? And if that's the case, then the simplest way to take care of something like that is by what? By moving him into an environment which is very spiritual, and then it will have an influence over him, hopefully. So let's have a look and see. Learn some very interesting halachas over here, which actually at face value seem to go against the Torah and Judaism. We'll see, right? Verse number 9, 10. You're going to go into the land of Canaan. And you're going to set up these cities of refuge. And a person who's going to have to go to the city of refuge is somebody who's committed manslaughter. Why would you need a city of refuge? So on the one hand, we just learned that the reason for the city of refuge is in order to allow the person to be imbued with spirituality and to draw themselves back up to where they're supposed to be. But there's a very, very practical dimension over here as well. There's something called a goel. What is a goel? A goel is an avenger. I don't know. It could be that the nearest concept to a goel that exists in the secular world might be a bounty hunter. Maybe. We'll see in a minute. What is a goel? Somebody has killed somebody by mistake. A case of manslaughter. The Torah says that the person who committed manslaughter, his life is now in danger. There is somebody who's appointed by the Beis Din, somebody who's appointed by the courts to be the official avenger. Normally, it's a family member, But if there's no family members, for example, the person who was killed had no immediate family, or he only had daughters, he had no sons, the court would appoint an avenger, a goyal. What was his task? His task was to try to get to the person before that person got to the city of refuge. If he manages to catch up with the person before he gets to the city of refuge, his brief is to kill him. It's not considered, hold on a second, it's not considered to be murder. It's considered to be sanctioned by the courts, and it's permitted, not only is it permitted, but it's a mitzvah for him to do that. If the person who committed manslaughter gets to the city of refuge, then at that point the goal is no longer allowed to touch him. Until when? Until he steps outside of the city again. If he steps outside of the city and the goal, the avenger, happens to be there, then the avenger could kill him. Which means like this: the person who committed manslaughter, not only does he have to go to the city of refuge, but he has to stay in the city of refuge. It's not like you get to the city of refuge, stay there for a week, and then you can go back home again. But rather, you go to the city of refuge, and we'll see how long he's got to stay there for. But you'll see that the city of refuge is a place that he's stuck in there. He can't get out. Because if he steps outside, what's he doing? Again, he's triggering off the possibility that the girl, the avenger, may find him, and then he may kill him. So it says, in the Gemara it says, in the Midrashim it says, that the city of refuge was a very interesting place, because, if somebody committed manslaughter and they got to the city of refuge, they would then call for their families to come and join them. They can't leave anymore, right? Which means that their wives will come, their children will come. The Gemara says that if a Rosh Hashiva by mistake killed somebody and has to get to the city of refuge, then the whole yeshiva should pick itself up and go over there as well to join the Rosh Hashiva and live over there in the city of refuge. It says that if a student ends up in the city of refuge, the Rosh Hashiva should consider taking the whole yeshiva over there so that the Talmud can continue to learn together with his friends. Which is that the city of refuge is not some kind of a nebuchi place where it's sad and there's very few people wandering around. The city of refuge was really a place that was full of life. It really was. First of all, it was full of Leviim, and then it was full of all of the families and the yeshivas, and there was a very vibrant life that was going on inside of the city of refuge. The only difference between the person who committed manslaughter and everybody else was that the person who committed manslaughter can't step outside the confines of the city, because if he does, he's putting his life in danger. Right? Everyone else, they can come and go as they please. Oh, so that's very right. The Gemara says like there's something very beautiful actually. It says that on the Arei Miklat, these cities of refuge had to be very clearly signposted. Right, which means like this, and it makes perfect sense. Right? The Gemara says that if you've got somebody who's running, he's running for his life, right? And if there's the signpost has been knocked down, or it's not clear, you come to a fork in the road and it's not clear, right? Which one the arrow is actually pointing to. If the person dies, if the goal catches up to the person because there weren't enough signposts, because it wasn't clear enough where they were supposed to be going to, so that becomes a responsibility of the community. It's a communal problem. Right? If the guy who's running away decides that he's going to sit down and he's going to have a little breakfast and he's going to wait and then he's going to go off on his way again, and in the meantime the goal catches up with him, so that's his problem. But if he's got no idea which way he's supposed to go because the signpost is missing and he doesn't have a clue, and then the goal catches up with him, then it becomes the problem of the community. So the communities were very careful to set up signposts very clearly signed which direction the Ir Miklat was in order to make sure that the person who's trying to get there should have every opportunity to get there without running into difficulties. On the other hand, says the Gemara, the roads to Yerushalayim, there were no signposts, right, pointing to Yerushalayim. Ask the Gemara, why not? So the Gemara explained, many people were coming to Yerushalayim. There were people coming the whole time. They had to bring their sacrifices, they had to bring the fruits, they had to bring this, they had to bring that. Never mind the 3 pilgrim festivals where everybody was coming, at least that way, you just follow the crowds, right? But what about, you're coming in, you've just got some first fruits that you want to bring into Jerusalem, you want to bring them into the temple. How do you know where you're supposed to go? If they don't have signposts up everywhere pointing to Yerushalayim. So explains the Gemara that because all these people were coming into Yerushalayim for a mitzvah, so that there was an inyan. It was considered to be good to ask people how to get to Yerushalayim. That people should see that these people are performing mitzvahs. I'm on my way to Yerushalayim. How do I get there? Right? That these people should know. Oh, look, somebody else on his way to do another mitzvah, which means that in a certain way they're like diametrically opposed to each other. The Ir Miklat has to be signposted so that the person doesn't have to ask anybody how do you get there, in order for him to be able to get there as quickly as possible. Yerushalayim is not signposted in order to make people ask, am I on the right path? Is this the right way to go? In order to publicize the idea that there's more, this person's doing a mitzvah, this person's doing a mitzvah, another person's doing a mitzvah. It's like a very fundamental idea. So he gets to the Ir Miklat. Now what? What's he supposed to do now? And he's got to get there. And once he gets to the Ir Miklat, then he's going to be, again, it's not 100%, right? Then he's going to be brought for trial. And in the trial, they've got to find out whether he committed murder, whether it was intentional, whether it wasn't intentional. There are different gradations. We'll see in a minute. וההורים אשר תיתנו 6 ערי מקלט תהיינו לכם. 3 ערים תיתנו מעבר לירדן ו3 ערים תיתנו בארץ כנען. So 3 of them, like I said before, are going to be on one side of the Jordan River, the other 3 on the other side of the Jordan River. ערי מקלט תהיינו. לבני ישראל ולגר ולתושב בתוכם תהיינה 6 הערים האלה למקלט, לנו שמה כל מכי נפש בשגגה. Now, what happened was like this in general, because we're not quite sure about the concepts of, somebody murdered or they didn't murder, how are we going to define exactly what happened over here? So when a murder had taken place, the person would get to the Ir Miklat, then he would be taken under guard to be tried, and they would then they would decide what was going to be with that person. Right? We'll see momentarily. Verse number 16. ואם בכלי ברזל יקהו וימויס רוצחו. So a simple scenario. A person's walking around with a metal bar and he takes it out and whacks somebody over the head with it. That's not called manslaughter, that's called murder. רוצחו. Mois yumas harotzeach. He's going to be taken out and he's going to be killed. Right? Executed. Not killed as in, right? There's going to be there'll be a trial and he'll be found guilty and then he'll be executed. Okay, so it says the Torah like this. Okay, you're a bunch of wise guys, right? So you're going to say, okay, you know what? So I won't kill him with a metal bar. I'll kill him with a stone instead.
What's happening
because
today?
Right? The Torah says that a metal bar, that's called murder. So here, the Torah comes along and says, and if you whack him over the head with a stone or with a rock, that's also called murder. Right? Murder is not going to be defined only by a particular description that's found inside of the Chumash. A murder is going to be defined in many cases. Murder is going to be defined also by your intent as well. Let's have a look and see. Oh, so you're saying to yourself, okay, you know what here? I'm smarter than the Torah is. So I won't kill him with a metal bar and I won't kill him with a stone. I'll take a wooden club. I'll take a baseball bat. Right? And I'll whack him over the head with it and that should be okay. Says the Torah, no, that's called murder as well. It's not going to help. Mois yumas harotzeach. Right? He should die. Goyel adam hu yomis es harotzeach bivgoy boy hu yimisenu. What about this avenger, the goyel? What's he going to do? If he comes across this person, then he can kill him. He can kill him however he wants, which means that he can use a weapon. He can use a metal bar. He can use a stone. He can use a baseball bat. Whatever he wants. Ve'im bisina yidafenu. Oy hishlich alav b'tzdiya v'yamois. So Torah is what happens if he pushes him. Right? You got 2 people involved in a scuffle. They don't get on with each other. and he pushes him, and he dies, right? He bangs his head against the floor after he's been pushed, and he dies. That's also called committing murder. See, what's pshat? Here you're saying like this. Okay. So I won't kill him with a metal bar, and I won't kill him with a stone, and I won't kill him with a baseball bat. Rather, I will push him, and he'll fall against the wall, and he'll bang his head, and that will be that. That'll get rid of him. Or I know that he's got a weak heart, right? And I'll jump out and give him the surprise of his life, and he'll have a heart attack and drop down dead, right? Says the Torah, no, it's the same thing. Gol adam yamis es roteach befigoy boy, ve'im bepeta beloy eva hadafoy. Oy hishlich alav kol kli beloy tzdio, oy bechol even asher yamuz bo beloy ro'ois ve'yapel alav v'yamois. Now what do we do in a situation where he jumps out in an ambush, or he's got a stone which is big enough to kill somebody, but it's not somebody that he doesn't get on with, right? Up until now, what have we been talking about? We're talking about a situation where there's a feud going on, everybody knows that these two people don't get on with each other, and now all of a sudden one of them is dead, and the Torah says, excuse me, right? But the chances of this being manslaughter are virtually zero. Everybody knows you didn't get on with each other. Everybody knows that you hated each other. And now he's dead and you're claiming manslaughter. It's not going to work. But what about if there is no history of enmity between them? A mistake has happened over here. ושופטו העדה בין המכה ובין גואל האדם על המשפטים האלה, והצילו העדה את הרוצח מיד גואל אדם, והשיבו איתו העדה אל עיר מקלטו אשר נוס שמה, ויושב בו עד מועצת הכהן הגדול אשר משה חוסה בשמן הקודש. Then that's considered to be manslaughter, and he's got to go off to the Ir Miklat, to the city of refuge, and over there, that's where he's going to stay until when? Says the Pasuk over here something absolutely fascinating. V'yoshav ba ad mois kohen hagadol, until the kohen gadol, until the high priest dies. The kasha is like this. What on earth has the kohen gadol got to do with this fellow over here? They've never met each other. They'll never meet each other. And yet it says that how long do you have to go to the Ir Miklat, to the city of refuge for? How long do you have to stay there for? Says the Torah, until the kohen gadol dies. Ask the sages. Very, very simple question. But you don't know when the kohen gadol is going to die, right? The kohen gadol could die tomorrow, and the kohen gadol could die in another 40 years' time, right? Some of the kohanim gedolim lived a long time. Here, Shimon HaTzadik, before he became a street, he was a kohen gadol at the beginning of the Second Temple period. He reigned as a kohen gadol for 40 years. Imagine if somebody would have committed manslaughter in the first day that Shimon HaTzadik becomes the kohen gadol. And now he's got to go to the Ir Miklat for how long? Until Shimon HaTzadik dies. That's 40 years later. And somebody else, on the other hand, he committed manslaughter the day before Shimon HaTzadik dies. And he goes there for a day, and then that's it. He can go free. And once he goes free, the avenger can't do anything at all can't do anything at all to try and avenge the death. Now that's it. It's all over. What has this got to do with anything? What has the kohen gadol got to do with anything? Like I said before, this fellow, he's never met the kohen gadol. He'll never meet the kohen gadol. More than that, it says like this in the Gemara. It says that the mother of the kohen gadol would go around to the various Ari Miklat, to these various cities of refuge, and she would hand out cookies to the people who were there, the people that had committed manslaughter that were stuck in the Ir Miklat. She would hand out cookies in order to stop them from praying that her son die. So here, I'm asking you a question. Just momentarily, imagine for 1 second that you're stuck in an Ir Miklat, you're stuck in a city of refuge. After having committed manslaughter, the Beis Din has told you that's where you need to be. You can't leave. You can continue life, but it's very much restricted. you step outside of the confines of the city of refuge, then you're putting your life in danger. And along comes the mother of the Kohen Gadol, right? And you're davening every day, you're davening that what? You're davening that the Kohen Gadol should die. Not because you've got anything against him. He's a nice guy, he really is, right? But what's the problem? The problem is that the Kohen Gadol is stopping you from being able to go home, right? To go back to your regular life. So you're davening every day that the Kohen Gadol should die, and one day the mother of the Kohen Gadol turns up with, with fresh baked, warm, delectable chocolate chip cookies, right? And she's handing them out. Here, have a cookie, have a cookie. Here, have a cookie, right? And now that you've been given a cookie by the Mrs. Kohen Gadol, by the mother of the Kohen Gadol, so now you're going to stop davening that the Kohen Gadol should die. So given the choice between the two, what makes more sense? To take the cookie or to carry on davening that the Kohen Gadol should die? I mean, I know we're Jewish, right? And Jews, they'll do anything for a meal. Food is like very central to everything we do, right? Like somebody once said, the Jewish year is comprised of, they try to kill us, we won, let's eat. That's how we celebrate the Jewish world, right? But even Jews have to be smart enough to understand that maybe they'll forego the chocolate chip cookie, right, in order to be able to keep davening that the Kohen Gadol should die, and rather than do it the other way around. So here, let's try to work it out. Let's try to see what's going on over here. There's the most beautiful idea that's going to unfold. First of all, what has the Kohen Gadol got to do with anything? So I mentioned to you before, the Gemara says, Kol Yisrael Reuven Zelazeh, we're all attached to each other, which means that if a person down here at the lower levels, the lower spiritual levels, was able to do something which was negative, it means that somewhere in the higher spiritual levels, somebody wasn't pulling their weight enough. Right? If somebody would have been a little bit more careful about what they were doing, the trickle-down effect would have meant that this person wouldn't have been able to kill the person that he did. You hear the idea? It's very basic. You should understand this. It really is, because it has the most incredible repercussion for all of us. Every single action that we do, whether for the good or whether for the bad, has a repercussion on the Jewish nation. Whether we like it or not. Is it fair? It's not fair, right? Doesn't make any difference. There's something collective. The Jewish people are described as being one person, ki ish echad b'lev echad, like one person with one heart, right? Which means that when you, when you pick your toenails, please excuse me for using the example, but when you pick your toenails and you get an ingrown toenail, it's going to affect your entire body, right? If you eat too much chopped liver, so it's going to affect your entire body. You'll say, but all I did was pick my toenail. All I did was put the chopped liver in my mouth. Why do I feel sick now? The answer is because your whole body is attached. It's all one. It's one unit with various different parts that are each doing their own thing. I saw once, it's an interesting thing. You go to doctors, especially over here in Israel. Every doctor is convinced that whatever they're treating, whatever their speciality is, that is the center of your well-being, right? So if you go to a foot doctor, right? I've seen this in many places. What are they called? People who look after your toes. Or podiatrist. What's that? Feet. Yeah. Go to a podiatrist and you'll see if the guy's from. You'll normally see somewhere in his office. You'll see a chart, and it's got the foot, and it's showing you how every part of the body is attached to the well-being of the foot. Right? Don't go to a doctor, renal, but somebody has kidney problems, right? So it's the same thing. The kidney is the heart of your medical well-being, right? If your kidney is functioning and well, you'll be well. Go to the eye doctor, you'll see the same thing. Go to the ear doctor, you'll see the same thing. I'll tell you the truth. They're all right, every single one of them. Because the body it's something incredibly delicate, and every part of your body is attached to every other part of your body, and it really does work like that. It really does. The well-being of each part of your body is going to have an impact on how you feel in general, right? If anyone here has ever had an ingrown toenail, toenails are really, they're pretty innocuous things, right? But if you had an ingrown toenail, you know as well as I do that it's impossible to function. You're in pain the whole time. It's just a tiny little thing, right? And you're in pain the whole time, and you can't concentrate, and you can't walk anywhere, you can't do anything, right? Especially if you're a man. Because, men, we're wimps. It's official, right? And it's an Indian. What's true about your body is true about the Jewish people as well. If the Jewish people are described as being like an ish echad, ki ish echad b'lev echad, we're one body. Which means that if somebody does something wrong, that's like the toenail growing in, right? It's going to affect the entire body. Hold on a second. If you do something right, it's a big if, right? But if you do something right, it's going to have an impact on the entire body. It's going to be good for everything, right? Well, what does it mean when it says you've got to wait for the Kohen Gadol to die? Because the Kohen, in the spiritual hierarchy, the Kohen Gadol is on the top, right? He's at the top of the pyramid over here. And then you've got everything else layered down underneath in spiritual terms, yeah? So ultimately what the Gemara is saying is like this, what the Torah is saying is like this, the most incredible idea. That ultimately this person over here committed manslaughter. Why did he commit manslaughter? Because the Kohen Gadol was lacking something very subtle that we would not have been able to identify. If we were looking at him, we wouldn't see it. But something very subtle was lacking over there. And if the Kohen Gadol was being a little bit higher, a little bit more attached, a little bit more in tune with the spiritual dimensions, then this fellow down here would never have been able to commit manslaughter. You hear? It's the most incredible idea. Now listen to this. That's why you got to wait for the Kohen Gadol to die, because when the Kohen Gadol dies, the person who's ultimately responsible for where you are right now has now left the world, and now you can leave. Yeah.
Two things come to mind. One is, it's almost as though, those who committed this crime for being sent to the city of refuge, and what what spiritual shortcoming, what weakness caused that? Could that have gone the other way and affected the Kohen Gadol? Is it just something missing?
Good question.
Okay, so that, and also, you probably heard, what is it called? There's like the weakest link theory.
Yeah.
In business you learn.
Yeah, for sure.
Is this like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I think the two questions actually are really one question, which means that this is not a one-way street. This is not because the Kohen Gadol was lacking some kind of minute something, therefore, Joe Schmo down there committed manslaughter, but rather the level of Joe Schmo is going to be reflected within the Kohen Gadol as well. It's a two-way street, which means he's a Kohen Gadol of the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation will reflect what kind of Kohen Gadol they have, and the Kohen Gadol will reflect what kind of people he's representing. Right? And the weakest link inside of the Jewish nation is something which is going to have impact. It's going to have an impact on the Jewish people for sure. Just like, this idea of the weakest link is it's a very, very vivid imagery, right? You can have a chain which is incredibly solid. It's incredibly strong. But all it requires is just one weak link somewhere, and the whole of the rest of the chain is going to become obsolete, right? Which is within the Jewish people here. This famous story, we spoke about it the other day, the famous story when the Jewish people went into Jericho, and they destroyed the city of Jericho, and God said not to take any spoils whatsoever, right? And somebody called Achan, he took the spoils from Jericho, and then in the next battle they went to in Ai, there were people that died over there, 36 people died. And then they come, and Yoshua says to God, how did this happen? And listen, God says, Chatu Yisrael. The Jewish people sinned. Now, if we were the Jewish people, what would we say? At that time, if we were the Jewish people, what would we say? What do you mean the Jewish people sinned? We didn't sin. One lousy fellow went in there and took. We also went in and fought over there. We didn't take anything. We didn't sin. How can God come along and say that the actions of one person, or from the actions of one person, Chatu Yisrael, that the Jewish people sinned? Does that sound fair to you? No, right? And under normal circumstances, it's not fair. It really isn't. But when you claim, when you say that Kol Yisrael are Reuven Zelazeh, when you say that the Jewish people are one person, so when one individual within inside of the Jewish people sins, what is that? It's a reflection on the Jewish people themselves, no? Because the next person up, he wanted to sin, but it didn't work out for him. He wanted to take the booty, but it didn't work out. And the one just above him, he also wanted, but another reason. And the one above him also wanted, but, and also wanted, but. And all of that is being reflected in a downwards trend. It means that down at the bottom, somebody is able to do something which goes against the will of God. Why? Because the people who are higher than him they're not pulling him up. You hear? It's about as fundamental as you can get with regards to what the Jewish people are supposed to look like, with regards to who the Jewish people are. You know, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, which is what the Gemara says, the translation of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh means that we're all guarantors one for the other. You can't turn around and say, hey, it's got nothing to do with me. You can't turn around and say, he did it, it's not my problem. Like the Gemara says, it's like somebody who walks down the street and trips over his own feet, and then what's he going to do? He's going to start beating himself up. You tripped me up? Doesn't make any sense, right? Because he understands it. He tripped up. He tripped himself up. He understands that. But that's us as a Jewish nation as well, yeah.
You said something that made me remember something you had said a while back, was like during the time of the Second Temple, what was the reason for that? What was the why did we lose the Second Temple? It was something that they did among themselves. Right? Wasn't it
the second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, right? They hated each other for no reason.
And what was the average time in the life of the Second Temple?
A year.
That the
Kohen
Gadol served.
A year.
You know, it's like there it is.
For sure.
All the prisoners, all these guys got to leave.
Oh, so says the Gemara. Good question, right? Says the Gemara. All of this is only applicable when the Jewish people are behaving the way they're supposed to behave. Look, you have to understand, inside of every single society, right, there's always going to be people who aren't, always going to be criminals, right? And there are always going to be people who are, I guess, what do you want to call it, borderline criminals. They're irresponsible people, always. But they're not the norm. That's where manslaughter comes in, right? Fine. They can't be held accountable for having murdered that person, but they took their life away, right? How are we going to define that? So the Torah is defining it as over here as inadvertent murder, right? And then they've got to go to the Ir Miklat, and they've got to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies. And says the Gemara, but hold on a second, right? In the Second Temple period, you saw what was going on. The Second Temple period stood for 420 years. Out of those 420 years, 40 years was served by Shimon HaTzadik. He was the Kohen Gadol for 40 years, which means we're now down to 380. Right? If my memory serves me correct, there was a second Kohen Gadol who also served for many decades. And says the Gemara, there were 300 Kohanim Gdolim in the second Temple period. Which means after you've taken away the tzaddikim that served over there at the beginning of the Second Temple period, once you've taken them out of the equation, you're left with a Kohen Gadol being replaced every year. Says the Gemara, well, then the idea of, where exactly are the checks and balances over here? If somebody's not careful enough and they commit manslaughter and they go to the Ir Miklat, they know that they're going to be there for how long maximum? They'll be there for a year. They know that, right? It'd probably be even less than that because of what was going on. So says the Gemara, at that point everything came to an end. Which was the idea of going to the Ir Miklat, it's only applicable, it only works when the Jewish people are functioning the way that they're supposed to function. If you're not functioning the way that you're supposed to function, then forget it. All bets are off. You hear? Which means that an Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, is there in order to be an outlet. You know what, an outlet's not the right word, an inlet, I suppose, right? In order to be an inlet for people who have been irresponsible but can't be held accountable. But it's only going to be applicable when the majority of the Jewish people are responsible and are accountable. And when we run into a moment in history when it's not, the Jewish people are not functioning properly, then at that point, that's it, the whole thing is off. It doesn't work anymore. Here, let's just a little bit more. The Torah then lays down that you should know that when it comes to giving testimony with regards to capital cases, one witness is not enough. You need two witnesses. You should know something, that in Jewish law, the idea of a Beis Din being able to put somebody to death, it was very, very rare. Because the interrogation of the witnesses was so thorough, and there have to be two, and they have to be saying exactly the same thing. All the details have to match up with each other, and they're being interrogated not together, one after the other, to the point where it says that if one person says that he had yellow shoelaces, and the other one says that he had black shoelaces, then that's it. We throw out their testimony. The person can't be held. The person can't be found guilty. Right? It was very, very difficult. The Gemara says to the point where if you've got a Beis Din that finds somebody guilty once in 7 years, and according to one opinion, once in 70 years, that's called a murderous Beis Din. It's even when it's clear that the person did what he did. If you can't match up the testimony, or if you don't have the witnesses, a person can walk into Beis Din, right? Listen to this. And he can say, I saw so-and-so take out a sword and chop off what's his name's head. Right? And so-and-so can say, yep, you know what? I did it. And the Beis Din can't do anything at all. Because you're not allowed to bring testimony, negative testimony about yourself. And it's only one person who's bringing testimony that he saw what he saw. And the Beis Din, there's not very much the Beis Din can do now. You hear? Built into this whole system is it's very, very difficult to actually have a moment where somebody's going to be executed for whatever they've done, because it's very complicated to get enough testimony to be able to rule like that. Why is that? Because Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to kill people. He really doesn't.
It's interesting how especially today, how so many people want that as part of today's state of Israel law, and how
how they want what?
And to capital punishment, and who it is who oppose it, who it is who would fight against it.
I tell you what, part of the problem is that the Western values today are moving away from capital punishment. In Israel, the reason why capital punishment is something that people are advocating for is because there's this incredible sense of frustration. That there's a feeling that if there was some kind of a capital punishment, then it would dissuade an awful lot of people from behaving the way that they do, especially Arabs who the Massei, they know that whatever they do, they'll end up in prison, and they'll stay there for however long they stay there, and then they'll be released and they'll be fated, and whatever, everything that we've seen over the last little while, that there's no deterrent. I think that this desire of some Israelis to have an active capital punishment has got nothing to do with, for sure, it's nothing to do with them being bloodthirsty. It's just to do with an incredible sense of frustration. That there's no room for maneuver. There's nothing that can be done to deter what's going on, except for the ultimate deterrent, which is if you do this, then you'll lose your life. What will be? I don't know. Here, just one last thing over here before we finish. And don't bring guilt to the land through the blood. And we've got to be very careful not to spill blood for no reason, which means that the blood that's going to be spilled, if it's not supposed to, if it's blood that was spilled, it shouldn't have been spilled, it's going to cause some kind of spiritual repercussion to the land itself. It's interesting that it says that you shouldn't contaminate the land. You shouldn't make it tameh. Don't make it impure. Because I'm God who lives within the Jewish people, which means it's not just us that are holy, the land is holy as well, and we're both supposed to reflect that, right? We're supposed to reflect the holiness of the land, and the land is supposed to reflect our holiness as well. Good. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Mitzvah Hashem.